Welcome, sleepy soul. I'll be your storyteller tonight, guiding you gently toward deep, peaceful rest. Before we begin, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more bedtime tales. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is, and if there's a story you'd like next. I'd love to hear it.
My name is Aaron, and I swear to you, I did not move into that house looking for trouble. I was just a guy trying to get back on my feet. It was cheap. That's what hooked me. A little one-story rental on the edge of town, crooked fence, peeling white paint, a patchy front lawn that tried its best to look alive. The kind of place you scroll past, unless the price is low enough to make you stop. Mine was. The landlord, Mr. Keene, was waiting on the porch when I arrived with my boxes. Thin, hunched guy in a brown cardigan that looked older than the house itself. His eyes were pale and watery, the kind that never really seemed to focus on you, just somewhere near you. "You're Aaron?" he asked. I nodded, shifting the box in my arms. "Yeah, sorry I'm a bit early." He waved it off. "Early's better than late. Come on, I'll show you around." The house was small but not terrible. A narrow hallway, 2 bedrooms, a cramped bathroom, a living room with a sagging couch he said I could use, and a kitchen with ancient appliances that hummed even when they were off. There was a faint smell in the air. Not rot, not mold. Just something stale and lived in, like old books left too long in a damp attic. Any attic? Basement. I asked, more out of habit than anything. I'd grown up in old houses. There were always hidden places, weird corners. "No basement," he said quickly. "No attic either. Crawl space is sealed. Everything you see is everything there is." He said it too fast. I remember that, like he'd rehearsed the answer that I almost asked about it. But I was tired, and I needed a place. So I signed. The first night was uneventful. Unpacking, microwave noodles, a couple of beers, scrolling on my phone until my eyes burned. The hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the old wood as the house settled. I slept on a mattress on the floor under a ceiling fan that ticked with every rotation. Then the second night came. It was sometime after 2 a.m. I know because I'd checked my phone just before it happened. I couldn't sleep. The house felt slightly off-kilter, like it was leaning in on me. The air was cooler than the first night. A thin draft moving under the bedroom door. Even though the windows were shut, I was on my back, staring at the shadow of the ceiling fan blades. When I heard it, a heavy, dull thud. Not from the hallway, not from the next room. From below me. The sound vibrated through the mattress, a deep impact like something heavy had dropped directly under the floorboards. I froze, every muscle locking tight. Then, in the silence that followed, I heard it again. Not a thud this time, footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps. They moved beneath me in a lazy, uneven rhythm. Step, scrape, step, scrape, as if whoever was down there was dragging one leg. You know the difference between pipes, creaks, settling wood, and something walking. This was walking. I held my breath, listening. The footsteps crossed beneath my bed, then stopped somewhere near the far wall. For a long time, nothing. I told myself I was imagining it. Lack of sleep, new place, old house noises. I forced myself to roll over, face the wall, close my eyes. Then, faintly, I heard something else. A soft, shuddering exhale. Like someone trying to control their breathing. Right under me. The next morning, the house looked ordinary again. Sun coming through the thin curtains, dust floating in the air, the kind of quiet that almost made me laugh at myself. Almost. But the idea got stuck in my head. There is no basement. So where, exactly, had those footsteps come from? I spent the morning pretending to ignore it, making coffee, opening and closing cupboards, checking the time even though I had nowhere to be. By noon, I was on my knees in the bedroom, knocking on the floorboards like an idiot. Most of it sounded solid. Then my knuckles hit a section near the center of the room, and the sound changed. Hollow. A deeper, emptier resonance. I pulled the rug aside. Just old, scuffed boards. No hatch, no hinges, no obvious seams. Still, the sound was different. I got a screwdriver from the kitchen drawer and started prying. The wood complained, nails squealing as I levered up the first plank. Under it, There was another layer of boards. Newer, lighter wood. Someone had patched something here, then covered it. My heart was pounding now, my shirt clinging to my back with cold sweat. I dug my fingers into the crack and pulled. The second layer came up with a sharp snap, and a gust of cold air breathed up into my face. Beneath the boards was a square opening. A hatch. It hadn't been cut clean. The edges were rough, splintered. Below, beyond the frame, I saw darkness and the top of a narrow concrete step leading downward. The smell rose up first. Damp soil, old wood, rust, something faintly metallic, and underneath it all, a stale, sour note like sweat left on clothes for too long that I should have called someone. I should have closed it back up. But curiosity is like a sickness. I got my phone, turned on the flashlight, and aimed it into the hole. The beam slid down a tight stairwell about 12 steps, ending in hard-packed dirt. The walls were bare earth, roots jutting out like black veins. It wasn't a finished basement. It was more like a dugout cellar, the kind you'd expect under a farmhouse from 100 years ago, not a rental on the edge of town. That I went down. The air grew colder with each step, pressing against my skin, seeping through my shirt. My breath fogged in the light as I reached the bottom. The ceiling was low enough that I had to hunch slightly. The smell was stronger down there, layered and old, like the ghost of many different scents all trapped together. My light moved across the room. Old furniture, 4 chairs, mismatched and battered, set in a rough circle. An overturned crate, a small metal table with rusted corners. In the middle of it all stood a single wooden chair facing outward, its back to the dirt wall. It was different from the others, thicker, heavier, its legs sunk slightly into the earth from weight and time. Leather straps hung from the arms and the back. They weren't decorative. They had buckles. Some of the leather was torn, frayed at the ends. On the right armrest, the wood was darker in one spot, a stain that had soaked in deep. I didn't want to think about what it was, but my brain filled in the blanks anyway. I turned slowly, shining the light around the room, half expecting to see someone standing in a corner. There was no one, just dirt, old boards supporting the ceiling, and the circle of chairs, all facing that strapped one like an audience. That's when I noticed the marks on the ground. Grooves scratched into the dirt around the chair. Not random arcs, scuffs, shallow trenches where something had been dragged, or someone that I felt watched. There was no sound, no movement, but some animal part of my brain was screaming at me to get out, get out, get out. The air felt heavier, pressing on my chest, buzzing in my ears. I backed away slowly, my light still on the chair, unable to turn my back on it. When I got to the stairs, I practically scrambled up them, breath coming fast. The moment I climbed out and shut the hatch, the pressure eased. The house returned to its quiet, stale normal that I tried to convince myself it was just something old, something from another time. A weird, ugly secret the landlord hadn't mentioned because he knew it would scare people off, so I went to ask him. His house was only 2 blocks away, a small, sagging brick place with an overgrown yard. He answered the door like he'd been waiting standing right behind it. "You settled in?" he asked, but his eyes were already scanning my face, searching. "There is a basement," I said. His jaw clenched, just enough for me to notice. "No," he said, "there isn't. I found the hatch," I insisted. "Under the bedroom floor. There's a room down there. Chairs, straps. What is that place?" For a second, his face drained of color. The watery eyes focused properly for the first time, sharp and afraid. "You opened it," he whispered. It wasn't a question. I felt my stomach sink. "What is it?" He looked past me, over my shoulder, as if someone else stood there. His voice dropped to almost nothing. "You should have left it sealed. That doesn't answer." He shut the door. Just like that. No explanation. No get out. No offer to break the lease. Just fear. And that one line, echoing in my head all the way back to the house. "You opened it." I tried not to be there that night. I drove around until the sky turned from blue to black, until the gas light flickered on. I sat in a fast food parking lot with the engine running, staring out at the empty road, listening to the tick of the blinker I'd forgotten to switch off. But eventually, I went back. The house was dark and silent when I stepped inside. The air felt heavier, as if the walls were holding their breath. I told myself I'd sleep on the couch. I wouldn't go near the bedroom. I wouldn't even look at the floor. I lasted until a little after 1 a.m. I was half asleep on the couch, wrapped in a thin blanket, when I heard it again. Thud. The same deep impact right under the house. The wood beneath the couch gave a tiny shiver. My eyes shot open. Then came the footsteps. Slower this time. More deliberate. Step, scrape, step, scrape. Moving directly under the living room, pacing in short, measured lines. Like someone testing the limits of a small space, I sat up slowly, my throat dry, every breath loud in my own ears. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then, from the direction of the hallway, from beneath the bedroom, came a new sound. A long, slow creak, like weight settling onto an old wooden chair. I could hear the leather too. A faint, resisting stretch, like straps being pulled tight. The temperature dropped. I could feel cold bleeding up through the floor, numbing my bare feet. My phone was in my hand before I realized I'd grabbed it. I turned on the flashlight, the beam trembling over the walls as I moved to the hallway. I didn't want to go, but some part of me needed to know. The bedroom door was slightly open, just a sliver of darkness between wood and frame. I nudged it with my fingers. The hinges gave a soft whine, and the door swung inward. The rug in the center of the room was no longer flat. The hatch was open. The boards I'd pried up were leaning against the wall as if someone had carefully removed them from below. The square of black in the floor seemed deeper than it had during the day, a pit that swallowed my light before it even reached the steps. For a moment, there was nothing. Then, from that darkness, I heard it, breathing, not labored, not panicked, slow, steady, patient. The kind of breathing you hear from someone sitting comfortably. Waiting. My light shook as I aimed it into the hole. The beam caught the first few steps, the rough earth walls, and then stopped, swallowed by shadow. The breathing continued, unfazed, almost amused that I didn't go down. I couldn't move at all. My body wouldn't respond, like my brain had disconnected the wires. I just stood there, listening, the cold wrapping around my ankles and crawling up my legs. Then the breathing changed. It shifted from below to directly beneath me, under the floorboards at the edge of the hatch. I heard the subtle whisper of weight moving, the scrape of something against the underside of the wood. And then, very softly, the house answered, step, scrape. Not down there anymore. Above. I heard the floorboards in the hallway creak behind me. A slow, dragging approach. I hadn't heard anything climb the stairs. I hadn't heard anything pull itself out of the hatch. But now, whatever had been sitting down there was in the hall. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. The footsteps drew closer, each one a quiet protest of old wood. I felt the floor dip slightly behind my heels, as if someone tall and heavy had stepped there, just inches away. The breathing was at my ear now, warm and wrong. It smelled like damp earth and rust and something sour, like old sweat soaked into leather. A low, almost thoughtful exhale brushed the back of my neck. I shut my eyes. Nothing touched me. No hand, no grab, no voice. Instead, I heard the slow retreat. The footsteps shuffled back into the hallway, then faded toward the living room. A chair creaked out there, the old one by the window, as if someone had sat down to watch the dark. The house went quiet. The hatch is still open. The landlord won't answer his door anymore. When I knock, I see the curtain move. I see his shadow, but he won't speak to me. Maybe he knows there's nothing he can do. Maybe this is what happens to anyone who opens that place. I don't sleep much now. When I do drift off, it's always the same. I wake up with the feeling of eyes on me, from somewhere just out of sight. Sometimes the breathing is in the hall. Sometimes it's right under the bed. Sometimes, when the house is at its stillest, the old chair in the living room creaks. Even when no one is sitting in it, I think whatever they used to strap into that basement chair got used to being watched. Now it's the one watching, and it knows I'm the one who let it out. I moved into the building because it was quiet. That's what the listing said. Anyway, quiet, older tenants, long-term residents only. After the chaos of my last place, thin walls, screaming couples, someone's music always bleeding through, the idea of silence felt like a luxury. The apartment was on the 3rd floor of a narrow brick building at the edge of downtown. For units per floor, no elevator. Stairs that groaned like they were remembering every footstep they'd ever carried. The hallway was long and dim, with a faded runner rug that had probably been red once but was now a tired brown. My apartment was 3B. The landlord, a man in his late 50s named Mr. Avery, met me out front with the keys. He was one of those people who always looked like he was halfway through deciding whether or not you were a problem. Tall, thin, with a gray mustache that didn't quite match his hair and a habit of wringing his hands when he talked. "You're Sarah?" he asked. "Yeah. Hi." I shifted the box in my arms. "Thanks again for letting me move in a week early." He nodded, distracted. "You pay, you stay. Simple as that. 3rd floor, Unit B. I've got the lock codes changed for you." We climbed the stairs together. The building smelled like old carpet, cooking oil, and something faintly floral. Probably the air freshener plugged into the wall that was struggling for its life. When we reached the 3rd floor, he stopped at the far end of the hall and gestured. "Yours is there, left side." Then he pointed to a door at the very end of the corridor. It was painted the same dull beige as the others. No number, just a tarnished brass knob and a tiny old keyhole beneath it. "And that," he said, his voice tightening slightly, "is the storage room." I followed his gaze. "Do I get a key for that too?" No, the answer was immediate, sharp enough to make me blink. That he must have seen my reaction because he softened his tone, cleared his throat. "Sorry, let me be clear. That door stays locked. Tenants don't go in there. You don't need anything from that room. If you have extra stuff, keep it in your unit." "Okay," I said slowly. "Is it dangerous or—" "No," he said, again too fast. His eyes didn't leave the door. "Not dangerous, just off limits. Building rules. You follow them, we don't have problems." "Understood." I nodded, but as he handed me my keys, a cold little thread of curiosity knotted in the back of my mind. The first day was all boxes and exhaustion. The apartment itself wasn't bad. Wood floors, tall windows, ancient radiator, kitchen that hummed when the fridge kicked on. I set my bed up, plugged in my lamps, arranged my books on a sagging shelf. By the time the sun went down, the place looked almost like a life someone could live. It wasn't until late that night that I really noticed how quiet the building was. Not just quiet, hollow. No muffled conversations. No TV sounds bleeding through the walls. No doors closing, no footsteps overhead. Just the low ticking of my clock and the occasional gurgle of the pipes. I remember thinking, this is what I wanted. Peace. I lay in bed, staring at the shadows of the window frame on my ceiling, listening to the radiator hiss softly. Sleep was just beginning to pull me under when I heard it. A faint sound, far down the hall, soft enough that I almost thought I imagined it. Humming. Not music, not a song I recognized. Just a low, tuneless hum, like someone talking to themselves without words. It rose and fell in a vague rhythm, drifting through the quiet. I held my breath, listening. It was coming from the direction of the hallway, not above or below. From the same end where the storage room was. I told myself it was just another tenant. Maybe someone in 3D, the unit right before the end. Old walls, weird acoustics. Sound bounced in strange ways. Still, I got up, padded over to my door, and pressed my ear against it. The humming was clearer out there. Low, constant, almost soothing if it hadn't been so out of place. I couldn't tell if it was male or female, young or old. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. The sound of someone who had done this many times before. After a minute, another sound joined it. Footsteps, soft, measured pacing. Heel toe, back and forth on old wood. The hum didn't stop. It just floated over the steady rhythm of steps. I imagined someone walking in circles in their apartment, restless. I told myself that I also noticed that it didn't sound like it was coming from the left or right. It sounded like it was coming straight from the end of the hall. From behind the storage room door. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, everything felt normal again. Sunlight, coffee, the faint noise of traffic outside. I took a walk around the neighborhood, found a little convenience store, memorized where the bus stop was. By the time I got back, The weirdness of the night before had faded into that hazy, dismissible space in my mind where dreams go. That lasted until the second night. The humming came back, right around the same time, just after 1 a.m. It started softer this time, almost like it was testing whether I was awake. The same slow, aimless melody, drifting under my door. Then came the pacing, that familiar, steady rhythm. I lay in bed staring at the darkness, the hairs on my arms prickling. The humming went on, never quite forming words, never quite becoming a song. Finally, I'd had enough that I slid out of bed, pulled on a sweater, and cracked my door open. The hallway beyond was almost completely dark, lit only by a weak, yellowish bulb at the far end. The air was cooler out there, the kind of chill that sinks in behind your ribs. The humming was clearer in the hall, definitely coming from the very end. From the storage room door that I took a few steps forward, bare feet silent on the runner rug. Each step brought the sound closer, narrower. It felt like walking toward a voice calling from the bottom of a well. By the time I was halfway there, I could hear the footsteps too, pacing, back and forth, back and forth. In my mind, I could see grooves worn into the floor from repetition. The door itself looked the same as before. Dull paint, tarnished knob, small old keyhole. No light leaked from underneath it. No shadows moved. Just the humming. I stopped an arm's length away. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I stared at the keyhole. It was barely bigger than the nail of my little finger. The humming was right on the other side now, like the person was standing still, facing the door. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, stupidity, some instinct that needed to see the thing making the sound. I leaned forward and put my eye to the keyhole. At first, I saw nothing, just darkness. Then, very slowly, something pale moved across that tiny circle of view. Something round, glistening faintly. Bloodshot, the white veined with red, the iris an indistinct dark color. It was so close to the keyhole that I could see the wet shine of it, the minute movements of the pupil adjusting. It was looking at me. The humming stopped. The world narrowed to that one detail, the wet red veins, the slight twitch. It held me there, pinned in place like a pinned insect. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. And then, from behind the door, very close to the keyhole, I heard something else. A whisper. Not words, just the sound of air being shaped, the ghost of syllables. But the tone of it, that hushed, eager not quite voice, slid across my skin like a cold finger. My body reacted before my mind did. I jerked away from the door and stumbled backward, almost tripping over the rug. My shoulder hit the wall. The humming didn't resume. The footsteps didn't resume. Just silence. Then, very gently, the doorknob turned. I watched it move from all the way down the hallway, metal grinding against metal as invisible fingers twisted it. The latch clicked softly, and the door shifted an inch, then another. I ran. I didn't wait to see it open. I didn't want to see what would step out. I slammed my apartment door shut, locked it, slid the chain across with shaking hands, and stood there with my back pressed to the wood, listening. The hallway was quiet. I barely slept at all. Morning. The light made it all feel thin and impossible. Of course it did. Fear shrinks in daylight. Still, I wasn't imagining the tired ache behind my eyes, the way my hands shook when I made coffee. Around 9, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Mr. Avery's voice floated up as he spoke to someone outside. Then the front door shut, and the steps came up to the 3rd floor. I opened my door as he was walking past. "Mr. Avery," I said. He stopped, eyebrows lifting. "Yes. Can we talk about the storage room?" The change in his face was immediate. His jaw tightened. The lines around his eyes deepened. "What about it?" he asked carefully. I hesitated, feeling stupid even as the words formed. I heard humming and footsteps. Night. From that direction. I looked through the keyhole and I stopped. His eyes had gone flat. Not surprised. Not confused. Just resigned. "You looked," he said quietly. "I saw an eye. Someone is in there. Is that another tenant? Is someone living in that room?" He shook his head once, very slowly. "There's no one living in there." "You're sure?" Because, Sarah, he said my name like an apology. That room stays locked. You were told that. It was locked, I insisted. Last night someone turned the knob. The humming stopped. He cut me off with a raised hand. Whatever you think you saw, you need to forget it. That room has been sealed for years. That word stuck. Years? But you said, I said, he repeated, his voice hardening, that the storage room stays locked. Tenants do not open it. They do not look through it. They do not talk about it. I stared at him, heartbeat slamming behind my ribs. Why? He hesitated, then sighed, looking older than he had a moment ago. Because the last person who tried to live in there never left, he said. Not really. Before I could ask anything else, he stepped past me, down the hall to the storage room door. He tried the knob. It didn't move. See, he said. Locked. Don't go near it at night. It'll quiet down after a while. It, I repeated. But he was already going back downstairs. That night, I pushed my dresser in front of my door. It made me feel stupid and safe at the same time. The wood screeched against the floor as I shoved it, my arms burning. When I was done, there was a solid barrier between me and the hallway, at least in my head. Around midnight, I dozed off. I don't know what time it was when the humming started, only that it dragged me up from sleep like a hand around my throat. It was louder now. Not faint, not drifting. Clear. Close. The melody hadn't changed, still shapeless and low, but there was a new quality to it. A kind of pleased anticipation that I opened my eyes to darkness. The only light came from the digital clock by my bed, its red numbers bleeding softly. 2:13. That the humming wasn't in the hall. It was on the other side of my bedroom wall. The one that shared a boundary with the end of the hallway. My skin went ice cold. I could hear the slight vibration in the plaster as whatever moved, pacing in that narrow space. The sound had weight now. Presence. I slid out of bed and pressed my hand to the wall. The plaster was cold, almost damp. The humming continued, the notes vibrating against my palm. I moved my hand down and I felt it, a faint impact like something tapping gently from the other side. Then came the footsteps. Not in the hall this time. Above me, slow, deliberate steps on the ceiling, crossing the room in a straight line, right over my bed. Each creak of the old boards sent a shudder through my body. The humming followed, now feeling like it was leaking from all directions. I backed into the corner of the room, heart racing so fast I felt sick. The radiator clicked softly, useless against the unnatural cold that had seeped into the air. My breath fogged faintly in front of me. The ceiling steps stopped. Then the sound shifted. The humming dropped away. For a moment, there was nothing. Then I heard it. Right outside my bedroom door. A slow, dragging exhale. A hand, or something like a hand, pushing against the wood. The faint, almost embarrassed scratch of nails at the surface. The dresser shuddered. Its weight pushed forward an inch. The wood complained, feet scraping against the floor. Something on top of it rattled. Whatever was out there was trying the door. I bit down on my hand to keep from making any sound. Tears burned the back of my eyes. The humming resumed, low and almost playful, right on the other side of the wood. The scratching grew more insistent. The dresser shifted another inch. The chain on the lock chimed softly as the door pressed inward. Then, suddenly, everything stopped. The humming, the scratching, the pressure. Silence. For a full minute, maybe more, I didn't move. Every muscle in my body screamed to stay perfectly still, as if any motion would give me away. Then, from somewhere much closer than the door, very near my ear, I heard a whisper. Not through the wall. Not through the wood. Inside the room. You saw me. Warm, stale air brushed my cheek. It smelled like dust, old smoke, and something sour, like a mattress that had never stopped remembering the people who'd slept on it. I turned slowly. There was nothing there, no figure, no shape in the dark. Just my bed, the dresser pressed halfway across the floor, the silent radiator. But on the far side of the room, near the window, the air seemed bent, like heat shimmering over asphalt, except the room was freezing. If I stared at that patch too long, my vision started to blur. My stomach rolling in protest, I didn't stay another night to BY morning. I had everything packed that I could fit into my car. I didn't wait to argue with Mr. Avery, didn't ask for my deposit back, didn't explain. When I passed him in the foyer, he just looked at me with those tired eyes and didn't say a word. That I told myself I was done with that building. But it wasn't done with me. A week later, I woke up in my friend's guest room, heart pounding, the ghost of a tune still echoing in my head. A low, tuneless hum, as familiar now as my own voice. The room was warm, safe, filled with the faint smell of laundry detergent and her lavender candle on the floor. Near the door, someone had laid out a thin, stained mattress that hadn't been there the night before. When I touched it, it was still warm, like someone had just gotten up. I never cared what a place looked like, as long as it was cheap and had a door I could lock. That's how I ended up at the Old Victorian on Hazel Street. You'd notice it if you drove past. 3 stories of peeling white paint, tall windows like empty eyes, a porch sagging toward the street like it was tired of holding its own weight. The front yard was mostly dirt with a few stubborn weeds. Somebody had tried to plant flowers once. All that was left were rusted wire frames and cracked pots. My name's Lewis. I just lost my job at a car rental place and gotten kicked out of my last apartment practically in the same week. A friend of a friend told me about a guy who rented rooms cash, no questions, in an old house. I didn't ask anything beyond the price. $450, the landlord said when we first met on the porch. Month to month, no credit checks. You keep your noise down and pay on time, we won't have problems. He was a big guy, not fat, just solid. Thick neck, thick shoulders, dark hair combed straight back, a permanent shine of sweat on his forehead even though it was cloudy that day. His name was Mr. Harlan, but he told me to call him Mr. H, with a smile that never reached his eyes. Utilities included? I asked, trying not to stare at the warped boards under my feet. Heat, water, electric, all included. His smile tightened. I take good care of the place. I'm here a lot. I check the pipes myself, especially end of the month. He said that like it mattered. The room was on the 2nd floor. Narrow bed, old dresser, a window facing the neighbor's brick wall, and a tiny bathroom that always smelled faintly of bleach and something else. Metal, maybe. Underneath the citrus cleaner was a coppery tang that didn't belong. I took it anyway. The first week was normal enough. I worked odd jobs during the day, unloading trucks, helping in a warehouse, and came back dead tired. The house was never completely quiet. Old wood moves, and the plumbing clanged like it had a temper. I heard other tenants through the thin walls sometimes. TV murmurs, a cough, someone walking with heavy steps overhead. I never really saw them, though. Just an occasional flash of someone's back disappearing into a door at the end of the hall. Mr. H was everywhere. He was in the kitchen tightening a faucet, in the hallway wiping down baseboards, in the basement hauling tools. He always had a rag over his shoulder and a bunch of keys jangling at his belt. Every time I saw him, he said the same thing. End of the month, 3 a.m., I'll be by to check your pipes. I don't knock, just so you know. I laughed the first time. That's specific. He smiled that not quite smile. Water lines run behind the bathroom walls. Noise carries better at night. Less traffic. You'll get used to it. I told myself it was just one of those weird landlord things and let it go. I had bigger problems. Rent came faster than I expected. It always does when you're broke. I scraped together crumpled bills and change for the first month, handed it over in an envelope. He weighed it in his palm like he could feel if it was right. That night, I went to bed early. I didn't really believe he'd show up at 3 a.m., but I woke up at 2:58 with my heart pounding like I'd been running. The room was dark, just a pale rectangle of streetlight on the wall. The radiator hissed softly. I could feel the dryness of the sheets under my fingers, the rough texture of cheap fabric. My mouth tasted stale. I don't know why I woke up, just that I did. At exactly 3. I heard the front door downstairs opened. It sounded wrong. Not loud, not banging, just this soft, practiced creak, like someone easing the door closed so it wouldn't wake anyone. Then came footsteps on the stairs. Slow, even. No hesitation about which step groaned the loudest. I held my breath, listening as they reached my floor. The hallway outside my room was carpeted, so the steps went muffled, but I could hear the faint rhythm of weight on old wood. They stopped right outside my door. I waited for a knock. Nothing. Then, through the wall behind my bathroom, I heard it. A single, dull clank like metal on metal. Then another. Pipes. It had to be pipes. He'd said he was checking them. The clanking moved slowly along the wall, behind the sink, then the shower, like someone was following the line of the plumbing with a wrench. Every once in a while, there was a soft drag, like something heavy being shifted just an inch. No talking. No humming. Just those careful, precise sounds. After about 15 minutes, it stopped. The footsteps came back down the hall, descended the stairs, and the front door opened and closed as gently as before. I lay there staring at the ceiling, trying to slow my breathing. It was weird, yeah, creepy, even. But he'd warned me. That was just how he did things. I told myself that and eventually fell back asleep. The second month was different. A few days before rent was due, little things started happening. I'd be brushing my teeth and hear a light scratching somewhere in the bathroom, just on the edge of hearing, like mice in the walls. When I pressed my ear to the tiles, though, it would stop. The smell got worse, too. The bleach was still there, sharp and artificial, but that metal smell underneath it grew stronger. If I let the hot water run too long, steam would fill the tiny room and the scent would wrap around me. Thick, iron, like old pennies and something rotting just out of sight. The night before rent day, I woke up again just before 3. This time, I was already sweating, pulse racing as if my body knew what was coming. The front door opened. Footsteps on the stairs. A pause outside my room. The doorknob turned slightly, just enough for the latch to click once, like someone testing it. Then it stopped. The noises behind the bathroom wall were different this time. Less like tools, more like movement. A dull, rhythmic thumping, slow and steady, like someone banging a fist weakly against wood. Mixed in with it was a sound I couldn't place at first. Low, wet, inconsistent. It took me a minute to realize it was someone trying to talk through something. The hairs on my arms rose even before the words formed. I could hear it under the pipes, under the creaks and knocks. A voice, hoarse and broken, squeezing through tiny spaces where sound shouldn't fit. Help, please. I sat up in bed, my heart slamming against my ribs. Could have been a neighbor, someone in another room, someone on the floor above with a TV on too loud. But the voice was coming from directly behind my bathroom mirror. Right where the water lines ran, and I stared at the closed bathroom door until my eyes burned. I didn't move. I didn't call out. That desperate, muffled plea. It didn't sound like someone shouting. It sounded like someone who'd been screaming for a very long time and didn't have much left. The thumping stopped. The voice faded into this broken, breathing sound, then went quiet. The faint clank of pipes resumed for a minute, then footsteps. Down the hall, down the stairs, door opening and closing. Rent paid in cash, utilities included. I told myself I'd imagined it. That's what you do when something doesn't fit into the world you understand. You file it under stress and move on. Until the footprints started. The third month, I noticed them on the morning of the 29th. Pale, damp ovals on the bathroom tile, starting from the tub and leading to the door. They were bare footprints, too long for my feet, narrow at the heels. I could see individual toes. They weren't mine. I hadn't showered yet. The tiles were cold and dry under my feet. The prints, though, glistened. Tiny beads of water clung to the edges, running slowly into the grout lines like the floor was sweating. I grabbed a towel and wiped them up. My hands shook the whole time. When I looked at the towel afterward, the patches where it had touched the prints were stained faintly brown, like I'd wiped up dirty water, or something else. That night, I locked the bathroom door from the inside and left the light on. I told myself it would make me feel safer. It didn't. I woke up at 3:12 with a start. Silence. No front door. No footsteps. Just the faint buzz of the bathroom light coming through the crack under the door, the radiator hissing like it was steaming out secrets. Then I saw them. Wet footprints. Not in the bathroom this time. On my bedroom floor. They started right at the threshold of the bathroom door and walked toward my bed. Each one was perfectly outlined on the old wooden boards, dark and gleaming like they'd been painted on with a wet brush. There were 12 of them. 12 steps from the bathroom to the side of my bed, where they stopped. I sat there, frozen, counting them, my breath catching in my throat. Something had come out of that bathroom while I slept. It had stood right next to me that I felt the weight of the house pressing in, listening. The smell was stronger than ever, thick and metallic, threaded with damp rot, like water that had sat too long inside ancient pipes filled with things that weren't supposed to be there that I didn't leave. I should have. I know that. But where was I going to go with a few $100, a duffel bag, and no job? Rent day came. This time, Mr. H didn't wait for me to bring the envelope. He knocked at exactly 8 p.m., smiled that thin smile when I opened the door, and took the cash from my hand like he already knew it would be there. "You settling in okay?" he asked that I swallowed. "Your pipe checks. You do that for all the units." "I take care of my property," he said. His eyes flicked over my shoulder, toward the bathroom. "I keep things maintained. It's better if I do it myself." "I've been hearing things," I said, before I could stop myself. Voices, footsteps, in the walls. Something shuddered behind his eyes. For the first time, the smile dropped completely. "You pay your rent," he said quietly. "You keep your noise down. You don't go exploring. That's the agreement, Lewis." "Exploring what?" He hesitated, then leaned in a fraction closer. I could smell his breath, coffee and something chemical, like the cleaners he used. "This house is old," he said. "Old houses keep things. They soak them up. All I ask is that you don't go looking for where it all went." That night, I decided to look anyway. Not out of bravery, out of sheer, stupid desperation. Whatever was happening, it was getting worse. And if I waited for it to come to me again, I didn't think I'd be able to pretend it wasn't real, so I stayed up. That I sat on the edge of my bed with my shoes on, a flashlight in my hand, waiting. Every tick of the clock made my nerves twitch. The radiator rattled occasionally. The streetlight outside flickered at T247. The bathroom light flicked off by itself that I hadn't touched the switch. The room darkened, swallowed by a thicker sort of shadow. The smell rolled in like a tide, damp, iron, mold. I could almost taste it at exactly 3. I heard water dripping. Not from the sink or the tub. Somewhere deeper. A slow, hollow plink. 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 Echoing from within the walls. Then I heard the first wet step. Right behind the bathroom door. I forced myself to stand. My knees felt like they belonged to someone else, joints filled with sand. I crossed the room, every breath loud in my ears, and put my hand on the bathroom doorknob. It was cold. Not room temperature cold. Outside in winter cold. Pain shot into my fingers and up my arm. I turned it anyway. The door opened on pitch black. The light switch did nothing. My flashlight flickered before settling into a weak, yellow cone that cut through steam I couldn't see but could feel clinging to my skin. The footprints were everywhere now. Layered on the floor, overlapping, some small, some large. 12 distinct sets, each making the same path over and over from tub to door. The tiles glistened, tiny rivulets running toward the drain even though the water wasn't on. The shower curtain hung half open. Beyond it, the back wall of the tub was wrong. It looked swollen. The tile bulged slightly, like something had been stuffed behind it. Tiny cracks ran between grout lines, seeping a faint, rust-colored moisture. When I leaned closer, I could hear it. A soft, wet shifting, like soaked fabric being squeezed. Under the sink, the cabinet doors were warped. The damp smell there was unbearable, dense and sour. I pulled one open. Behind the pipes, the drywall had been cut away. In its place was thick, matted insulation. Not the pink fiberglass kind. This was grayish, off-white, stained in blotchy patches. Stitched along the surface was something that made my stomach drop. Skin. Pale, leathery, stitched in strips between the framing, threaded through the insulation with thick, dark thread. It wasn't neat. It wasn't surgical. It was practical, efficient. Each strip overlapped the next, forming a muffled, organic barrier. Embedded in it, here and there, were other things. A fingernail still attached to a sliver of finger. A tuft of hair, clotted with dried brown residue. the corner of a lip pulled back by the tension of the stitching into a permanent, silent scream. The faint muttering I'd heard before wasn't in my head. It was air forcing itself through seams where mouths once were. I staggered back, while burning my throat. My flashlight beam swung wildly, catching the base of the tub, where a panel was missing. Behind it, more of the same. Rows of it. Bodies that weren't bodies anymore, flattened and stretched, stitched into walls between the studs, tucked into crawl spaces like soundproofing. Rent paid in screams. That thought came unbidden, and it made too much sense. The voices, the thumping, the way the house seemed to swallow sound. This wasn't insulation you bought at a store. This was recycled, reused. You don't hear someone begging for help if they're part of the wall. Unless the stitching is coming loose. I backed out of the bathroom, the footprints squeaking beneath my shoes. My heart hammered so loud I barely heard the soft creak of my bedroom door opening wider. I hadn't touched it. Curiosity, a voice said from the doorway, is what kills tenants. Mr. H filled the frame, his bulk blotting out the dim light from the hallway. His eyes were hooded, his shirt sleeves rolled up, forearms slick with sweat and flecked with dark spots I didn't want to identify. In his right hand was a tool I didn't recognize. Half hook, half all wicked and stained. "I told you not to go looking," he sighed, stepping inside. "But you people always do. You never just pay and sleep and keep quiet. There's always noise." I tried to run past him. He moved faster than he looked. His hand slammed into my chest, pinning me to the wall. The plaster cracked under my back. Up close, the smell of him blended with the bathroom stink. Bleach, sweat, and that heavy copper sweetness. "Do you know why the house stays so warm?" he asked softly. "Even in winter? Why it's so quiet inside? Why the neighbors never complain about yelling, or music, or anything?" I couldn't answer. I could barely breathe. He smiled, and this time it did reach his eyes. They lit up with something close to pride. "Because it's insulated," he whispered. "Every scream, every cry, every last little bit of noise, absorbed. I don't waste what people give me." He tilted his head, studying my face. "You came cheap, Lewis, but you'll pay well." He dragged me then through my room, past the bed with the 12 wet footprints beside it, to the narrow door in the corner I'd always thought was a linen closet. He unlocked it with one of his jangling keys. Stale, cold air rolled out, thick with dust and old, trapped breath. The crawl space behind the door was low and long, beams crossing overhead like ribs. The flashlight shook in my hand as he shoved me inside. The walls on either side were lined with that same gray insulation. In the flashlight's trembling cone, I could see features pressed beneath it. A cheekbone here, the suggestion of teeth there, the curve of what might have been an ear. There were 12 indentations in the floor, spaced evenly. Shallow depressions where bodies had knelt or lain before becoming part of the house. At the end of the row, where the insulation was still clean, untouched, was a space just my size. Above it, on the wooden beam, someone had carved lines. 12 vertical scratches. And next to them, the start of a 13th, half-finished, waiting. "You're number 13, he said behind me, almost gently, like he was telling me my room assignment. "Lucky, some people say. You'll make the house very, very quiet." I tried to scream then. What came out was a ragged, broken sound, swallowed immediately by the overlapping layers of flesh and fabric around me. The walls seemed to drink it in, dulling it, softening it, feeding on it. He moved behind me, humming under his breath. Not a tune, just a low, steady sound to cover anything I might make. His hands were big and steady as he pressed my shoulders down toward the floor. The last thing I saw before the light snapped off was the empty patch of wall in front of my face, waiting to be filled. I don't know how long ago that was. Sound doesn't travel properly here. Time doesn't either. I feel the house breathing around me, swelling and settling as tenants come and go, as rent is collected, as pipes are checked. Sometimes, when the screaming starts down the hall, I feel the vibration through the insulation, a shiver of shared terror. Sometimes I try to answer, but the stitches pull when I do, and the house doesn't like that. It's warm here, though. Warmer than it has any right to be. And so very, very quiet. If you ever find a place that's too cheap, too quiet, where the landlord insists on checking the pipes at 3 in the morning, don't move in. And if you already have, try not to make too much noise. He hates wasting insulation. I'm not the kind of person who believes in haunted houses. I grew up on ghost stories and horror movies. I know the beats. Creaking floors, flickering lights, a tragic backstory. I've always been the guy rolling my eyes, saying, old pipes, bad wiring. That's it. So when my friends asked why I was renting some random cottage alone for Halloween weekend, I told them the truth. I need to get out of the city. I need quiet. And it was cheap. My name's Jared. I do freelance graphic design, which is a nice way of saying I stare at screens for 12 hours a day and forget what sunlight looks like. I'd just gotten through a brutal month of deadlines, 3 all-nighters in a row, and a client who seemed personally offended by the color blue. By the time October rolled in, I was wrecked. Headaches, anxiety, that constant, vibrating feeling in your chest like your heart's trying to outrun everything. So I booked a cottage 2 hours outside the city. A charming, rustic lakeside retreat, according to the listing. No neighbors within shouting distance, weak cell signal, wood-burning stove, actual stars in the sky. It sounded like exactly what I needed. The landlord's name was Tom. He met me at the little gravel parking area just off the main road. Late 40s, heavy-set, with a sunburned neck and a faded ball cap that looked permanently attached to his head. He smelled faintly of motor oil and cigarette smoke. "You're the one for the cottage?" he asked, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Yeah, Jared." I held out my hand. His grip was quick and dry. He led me down a narrow dirt path through the trees. The air was crisp, that particular sharpness you only get in late October, with the faint smell of decaying leaves and distant wood smoke. The cottage appeared suddenly between the birch trunks. 1 story, weathered gray boards, a sloping roof, a little porch with 2 chairs that looked like they'd collapse if you breathed on them. The lake was just visible behind it, a dull silver streak through the trees. "I don't rent this one out often," Tom said as we walked up. "Place has been in used for years. You're lucky I still had it listed. And used. Odd word for a place that looked lived in." The curtains were drawn back. There was a broom propped against the porch rail, as if someone had been sweeping recently. The windows were dusty, but not as thick as I expected. He unlocked the door and stepped aside for me to go in first. The inside smelled like old wood and faint pine cleaner, not that stale, suffocating air of truly abandoned places. More like a cabin someone visited once in a while, just not often enough. Living room, small kitchen, bedroom to the left, bathroom to the right. Worn couch, round table, curtains with little faded blue flowers. A ceramic bowl on the counter shaped like a pumpkin, empty. "Fridge works," Tom said, heading to the kitchen. "Water's fine. Stove's old but safe. No Wi-Fi, obviously." "That's kind of the point," I said, trying to smile. He didn't smile back. His eyes were moving around the room, like he was checking for something, or someone. "You'll be alone out here," he said. "Nearest neighbor's 3 miles down the road. If you need anything, there's a landline." He pointed to an old phone on the wall, its coiled cord yellowed with age. "Dial 9 to get out." I nodded, dropping my bag next to the couch. "So this place has been empty a while?" "Yeah." He hesitated. "Unused for years. You'll be fine." He handed me the keys. His fingers lingered a second longer than necessary. "If anything feels off," he said, "just call me, all right?" "What do you mean, off?" He opened his mouth, closed it again, then shrugged it off. "Old house. Old noises. Don't let it spook you. Enjoy your vacation." And with that, he left. I stood in the middle of the living room, listening to his truck engine fade down the road. The silence that followed was thick, but not unpleasant. Just big. The kind of silence you don't get in the city, where there's always a siren or a neighbor or a TV somewhere. I unpacked. Put food in the fridge. Set my laptop on the table, more out of habit than because I planned to use it. By the time the sun started to go down, I had a fire going in the wood stove, casting a wobbling orange glow over the room. It was peaceful. Really peaceful. Until the next morning. I woke up to the smell of eggs. Not the lingering smell from the night before. Fresh. The kind that grabs you by the nose and drags you fully awake. Warm, savory, edged with butter and something like toast. For a second, I forgot where I was. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, listened. The cottage was quiet except for the soft tapping of branches against the roof. The light coming in through the thin curtains was gray, unfocused. My breath puffed slightly in the chilly air. The smell of cooked food was stronger. My heart did this weird double thump. I grabbed a hoodie and stepped out into the hallway. In the kitchen. On the counter, there was a plate. 2 scrambled eggs, still steaming. A piece of toast with butter melting into it. A mug of coffee, faint tendrils of steam curling up from the surface. For a few long seconds, my brain refused to process it. The sight and the smell didn't fit with the empty cottage I'd fallen asleep in. I hadn't cooked. I hadn't bought eggs. I'd eaten a microwave dinner and gone straight to bed. The fork resting on the plate had a smear of yolk on it, like someone had taken a bite and set it down. Hello? My voice sounded too loud in the small space. No answer. I checked the front door. Still locked. The deadbolt in place. The windows were latched. The key was where I'd left it on the table. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe Tom had a spare key and wanted to be nice. Maybe he came early, brought breakfast, noticed I was still asleep, and left it. Weird. Invasive. But human. I ate the eggs. The coffee was still almost hot. Too fresh to have been sitting more than a few minutes. All that day, there was a tightness between my shoulders, like a hand resting there, waiting. I read, went for a walk by the lake, tried to focus on the stillness I'd come for. That night, the cottage seemed to breathe, would creaked in long, slow sighs. The stove crackled. Every time I almost drifted off, I'd hear something. A soft click, a faint shuffle. Not enough to identify, just enough to pull me back from sleep. At some point, around 3 in the morning, I heard the front door handle rattle. Not violently, just a quiet, testing twist. Then a soft, almost apologetic bump, as if someone had leaned lightly against the wood. I lay there staring at the ceiling, heart thudding against my ribs. The handle stilled. Then, from the kitchen, I heard a light clink. Metal against ceramic. A drawer sliding. I wanted to get up, to grab something heavy and go look. But my legs felt rooted to the mattress. The house was too still, the sounds too careful. Whoever was in my kitchen wasn't breaking in. They were moving around like they lived there. It went on for maybe 10 minutes. Faint shuffle, the whisper of cloth, the fridge opening, closing, then nothing. Silence, except for my pulse in my ears. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I remember is morning light and that smell again. This time, it was pancakes. I walked into the kitchen slowly, already knowing what I'd see at a plate. 3 small pancakes, stacked, syrup shining on top, a pat of butter half melted, steam barely visible in the cool air. And again, 1 bite missing, a neat wedge cut out like someone had tasted them and then stopped. The mug beside it was filled with coffee, black, the way I drink it. Tom, I called louder this time. If that's you, it's not funny. No answer. I checked the doors and windows again. Everything locked from the inside. Something clenched in my gut. For the rest of the day, the cottage didn't feel peaceful anymore. Felt occupied. As if every chair, every shadow, was remembering someone else who'd been there before me. I called Tom. The line rang 5 times before he picked up. His voice sounded out of breath, like he'd hurried to the phone. Yeah, it's Jared. From the cottage. A pause. Everything okay? Someone's been here, I said. In the mornings. There's food on the counter. Fresh. I hear things at night, drawers, the fridge. Are you coming in without telling me? Silence hummed over the line. Tom. No, he said finally. I'm not. The way he said it made my skin prickle. Not offended. Not defensive. Just certain and afraid. You said the place hasn't been used in years, I pushed. But it's like someone's still living here. Is there another key? A neighbor screwing with me? There's no one else with a key, he said quietly. No neighbors close enough to walk. "You're alone out there, Jared." Something moved at the edge of my vision. I turned my head. The bedroom doorway was empty. "Look," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Every morning there's cooked food in the kitchen. Eggs, pancakes, still warm. Someone's here, Tom." On the other end, I heard him exhale slowly. It sounded like air leaving a punctured tire. "What did you say the listing said?" he asked. "About the cottage? That it hadn't been used in years." "It hasn't," he said. "Not by me." A shiver climbed my spine, vertebra by vertebra. "What does that mean?" He was quiet for a long time, long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Jared," he said at last, voice low, "has anything spoken to you?" I almost laughed. "Spoken? Like out loud? Just answer the question." "No," I said. "Just sounds. Cooking. Doors. That kind of stuff." "Okay," he said. "Listen to me. If you hear a voice, you pack your things and you leave. Right then. Don't wait. Don't stay another night." "You're kind of skipping ahead on the explanation part, Tom. I shouldn't have rented it," he muttered, more to himself than to me. I told myself it had been long enough. That it was over. Over. My chest felt tight. "I'll come by tomorrow," he said. "We'll talk then. Just, if she speaks to you, get out. Promise me." "She?" The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the dial tone humming in my ear. "That if she speaks to you." That night was worse. The wind picked up after sunset, making the trees scratch at the cottage siding like fingernails. The fire in the stove burned low, casting a dim, pulsing glow that threw shadows too big for the space. I tried to distract myself. Played something stupid on my phone, but every little creak pulled my attention. Around midnight, I heard it. A door opening softly. Not the front door. Somewhere inside. A quiet click, then the whisper of hinges. Soft, bare footsteps moved down the hallway. They stopped outside my bedroom. I lay there, every muscle locked, eyes on the dark ceiling. The footsteps didn't continue. Whoever it was just stood there. After a while, the weight shifted. I heard the faintest brush of skin against wood, like someone resting their palm on the door. Then nothing. I don't know how long I stayed like that before sleep finally dragged me under. I woke up to whispering. Not the wind, not the house. A human voice. "Close. Don't tell him I'm here." Warm breath tickled my ear. The voice was female, low and urgent, every word distinct. I smelled something, faint shampoo, floral and cheap, mixed with the sour note of sleep. I jolted upright, heart hammering. The bed beside me was empty. The room was dim, light just starting to bleed around the curtains. My skin still tingled where the breath had touched it. The voice had been right next to my head. My throat was dry as I croaked. "Who's there?" Silence. I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The floorboards under my feet were cold. I could see my own breath in the air, tiny clouds puffing with each exhale. "Hello," I called, louder. The whisper seemed to hang in the air, echoing inside my skull. "Don't tell him I'm here." I walked into the living room. On the coffee table sat a plate, toast, cut diagonally, a bite missing, a glass of orange juice half drunk, condensation beating on the side. On the back of the couch, near where my head had been when I slept, there was an indentation. The cushion slightly depressed, as if someone had been sitting there for a long time and just gotten up. I didn't touch any of it. I grabbed my keys, my bag, my phone, and walked straight out of the cottage into the cold morning air. The sky was a flat, washed-out blue. The trees whispered. I stood in the gravel drive, heart pounding, and called Tom. He answered on the first ring. "She talked to me," I said. "This morning." She said, "Don't tell him I'm here." For a moment, I thought he hadn't heard. The silence on his end was different this time. Heavy. Final. "How long ago?" he asked. 5 minutes. Maybe less. "I'll be there in 20, he said. "Stay outside. Do not go back in." "Who is she, Tom?" He exhaled a shaky breath. "That's impossible," he said. "She died inside that cottage long before you arrived." The lake rippled behind me, sending a chill across the back of my neck. Died how? I asked. He hesitated. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. She was hiding from someone, he said. Long story, bad situation. Her boyfriend, husband, whatever he was. She came here, said she'd pay me cash if I didn't tell him where she was. I let her stay. Thought I was doing a good thing. And he found her anyway, Tom said. Police said it was quick. I don't know. I heard enough through the door. Afterward, I closed the place up. Stopped renting it. Figured if it stayed empty long enough. He trailed off. Why start renting it again? Money, he said flatly. Stupidity. I told myself I'd imagined the things I heard. The food, the doors, the voice. His breathing hitched. What did she say exactly? I swallowed. Don't tell him I'm here. Tom swore under his breath. He used to come by, after pounding on the door, yelling that I was hiding her. Even after the funeral, he'd say it. Don't lie to me. Don't tell me she's not here. Over and over. A cold wind moved through the trees, carrying the sharp smell of lake water and wet leaves. She's still hiding, I said quietly. Yeah, he whispered. Yeah, she is. His truck pulled up faster than I expected. He got out, looking older than he had the day before. The lines around his mouth were deeper, his eyes bloodshot. We stood there, both of us staring at the cottage. Sometimes, he said, I'd come by and find 2 plates in the sink, 2 sets of footprints on the floor, like she had someone with her, like she still thought he would come. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Would you have believed me? He tried to smile. Failed. You can go. I'll refund your money. I'll deal with it. How? He didn't answer. Just started walking toward the door. I watched him unlock it, step inside, and call a soft, hello. The cottage swallowed his voice. I should have left. I know that. Gotten in my car, driven back to the city, filed it under weird and tried to forget. Instead, I stood there, listening. At first, nothing. Then muffled sounds. A drawer opening. Footsteps. Tom's voice, low, saying, It's all right. You don't have to hide anymore. Something answered him. Not in words. A low, layered murmur, like someone speaking from underwater. His reply was sharper, scared now. Jared, stay out there, he called. Do you hear me? Stay outside. I took 1 step toward the porch. The front door slammed shut. The windows went dark, as if someone had drawn curtains I couldn't see. The air around the cottage thickened, pressing against my skin like a storm about to break from inside. I heard a single, sharp scream, then silence. Not just quiet. Silence. The same heavy, absolute emptiness from when I covered the mirror in that other story you might have heard. The kind of silence that feels like it's listening. I don't know how long I waited. Long enough for my legs to go numb, my fingers to sting in the cold. Long enough for the sun to crawl higher, casting pale light over the cottage roof. Tom never came out. The police didn't find anything. No body. No signs of a struggle. Just an empty cottage with a plate on the table, a bite taken out of toast, and a mug of coffee gone cold. They said maybe he walked off. Maybe he had debts, disappeared, left the area. People do that. I know better. Sometimes, late at night back in my city apartment, I'll wake up to the faint smell of coffee, or toast, or pancakes, something warm and domestic that doesn't belong. Once, half asleep, I rolled over and felt the mattress dip beside me. Someone shifting their weight. A soft breath tickled my ear. Don't tell him I'm here, she whispered. I still don't know if she means Tom. Or someone else who hasn't found us yet. I moved into the building because I thought I understood what quiet meant. I'd lived above a bar before. I'd lived next to a couple who screamed themselves hoarse 3 nights a week. I'd done my time with stomping kids overhead and some guy down the hall learning guitar at 2 a.m. when I saw the ad. Strictly quiet building and no noise after midnight. I thought, perfect. My name's Daniel. I work nights from home doing remote IT support, which really just means people yelling at me over chat while I sit in a dark room trying to fix things I'll never see in person. I sleep late, I keep to myself, I wear headphones. I figured I was the ideal tenant. The building was an old brick block on a side street off downtown. For stories, narrow entryway, that faint smell of dust and floor cleaner. When I buzzed for the landlord, there was a delay. Then the door clicked open without anyone saying a word. He was waiting at the bottom of the stairs. "Daniel?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, for 4C. He wasn't what I expected. No slumlord vibe. He was in his late 60s, maybe older, with a neatly trimmed gray beard and a pressed shirt tucked into slacks. Everything about him was tidy. Not friendly, not unfriendly, just ordered, measured. "I'm Mr. Lennox," he said. "Come on up." The stairwell smelled faintly of old paint and something metallic, like radiator water. On the second floor, I noticed a little sign on the wall, printed and laminated, "Absolute quiet after 12 a.m. and no exceptions." "Noise complaint issues?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Not anymore," he said. "We have rules for a reason." My unit was on the 4th floor, at the end of the hall. 2 rooms and a bathroom, wood floors recently refinished. High ceilings with old plaster cracks like thin veins overhead. The windows were big and drafty, but they let in a lot of light. "This is nice," I said, meaning it. "It's a good building," he said. "She's old, but she stands. People stay a long time." He put the lease on the counter. Basic stuff. Rent, deposit, no pets, no smoking. Then he handed me a separate sheet of paper. "Midnight noise policy." It was printed in bold capitals. No televisions after midnight, no loud music, no parties, no raised voices. Then, at the bottom, a line that made me raise an eyebrow. From 12 a.m. to 5 a.m., no sound above 30 decibels is permitted. Tenants must not shout, scream, or create sudden loud noises. This is non-negotiable. Violations will not be tolerated. 30 decibels, I said. "You got a meter or something?" His eyes met mine. They were pale and very, very steady. "Do you plan on screaming in the middle of the night?" No. "Then we won't have a problem." He slid a pen across the counter. "Initial by the rule, so I know you understand it. Word for word." I signed. I told myself it was just one of those strict places, probably traumatized by years of bad tenants. The first night, I learned what quiet meant in that building. I'd finished a shift around 11:30 p.m., eyes grainy, shoulders tight. I made a sandwich, put on a podcast, low, just above a whisper, and sat at the little table by the window. AT 11:57. My phone buzzed. I glanced down. A text from an unknown number. "Lennox, remember the rule. Midnight. I checked the time. 11:57. I frowned, turned the podcast off, and typed back. "Okay. Got it. Exactly 12. The building. Change.it was like someone flipped a switch on the world. The ambient hum I never noticed until it vanished. The distant traffic, the faint clank of pipes from other units, the bass thump of someone's TV downstairs. Went dead. I've never been anywhere that quiet. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was like the air itself got thicker. Even my own movements felt wrong. When I stood up and my chair scraped lightly, I winced. It sounded too loud in that silence. Obscene. I went to the sink, turned the faucet on just to hear something. The water came out in a thin stream and hit the basin with nothing. I watched it splash. Droplets hit metal. My brain said, "You know that sound." But there was nothing. Just the visual of motion with no noise attached. The back of my neck prickled. I clapped my hands once. Hard silence. The noise didn't muffle. It disappeared. Cut out of reality like someone had deleted a line of audio. My palms stung, but the clap never existed. I shut the water off. My own breathing felt too loud inside my skull. But I realized that even that wasn't really reaching my ears. It was all internal, bone deep. The building had become a vacuum for sound. I went to bed without brushing my teeth. It felt like making the tap run would be attracting attention. The rule echoed in my head. No sound above 30 decibels. No screaming. No sudden loud noises. Something in that silence was listening. The next day, at normal volume, I asked Lennox about it. He was in the lobby, wiping down the mailboxes like he did it every day at the same time. "Is there some kind of noise dampening thing here?" I asked. Last night, after midnight, it was like a recording studio. He paused, cloth in hand. The building is old, he said. She settles. At night, everything stills. The rules are there to keep it that way. Right, but you get your rent discount because you agree to that rule, he said, looking right at me. If you can't live with it, I can find someone who will. I backed off. I didn't want to lose the place over a weird landlord quirk. The other tenants were quiet, mostly older. A middle-aged woman across the hall who always carried grocery bags. A guy in 3B who wore a cheap suit and smelled like too much cologne. I heard murmured conversations in the stairwell sometimes. Footsteps, door latches. All of it vanished at midnight. Every night. Like clockwork. You'd think I'd get used to it, that I almost did. Until the night in 3B.it was a Wednesday. My shift ran over. Some system crash in another time zone. I was wired and exhausted. It was 11:50 p.m. when I finally closed my work laptop. Downstairs, someone was having an argument. Muffled voices rose through the floorboards. Not loud enough to make out the words, just the cadence. Sharp, angry, overlapping. A male voice, tense. A higher one, shrill. A bottle clinked hard against a table. I checked my phone. 11:52.8 minutes. The voices got louder. A thud. A chair scraping. The beginnings of a shout. Instinctively, I opened my door and stepped into the hallway, listening. The sound was coming from directly below me. 3B, the argument spiked suddenly. A man's voice cutting through the building. Will you just shut up? Then, clearer than anything, a woman screamed. It was raw and furious, the kind of scream that rips out of someone when they stop caring who hears. It shot up through the floor, through the walls, filling my skull. And then, mid-scream, it just stopped. Not faded. Not cut off by a hand or a door or a choke. It was like someone had taken a razor to the sound and sliced it clean in half. 1 second, the scream was there. The next, it wasn't. Silence slammed down like a dropped weight. I stood in the hallway, heart pounding, ears ringing with nothing. A door opened below. Footsteps on the stairs. Lennox came up from the lobby, his expression grim. He didn't look surprised. He walked past me without a word and went down to the 3rd floor. I hovered, indecisive. After a minute, I followed. The hallway on 3 was dimmer, the light bulbs older. The air felt cooler. The door to 3B was slightly ajar. Lennox stood just outside it, his back to me. His posture was very still. "Mr. Lennox?" I said quietly. He turned his head slightly, enough that I saw his face, that he was pale. A thin sheen of sweat on his forehead. But his voice, when he spoke, was steady. "Go back upstairs, Daniel." Someone screamed. I said. It sounded like, "The rule is there to protect you," he said. "All of you, go." Something about the way he said protect made the skin between my shoulder blades crawl. That I should have left it alone. Should have gone back upstairs, shut my door, and pretended the world ended at my threshold. But an hour later, the building was filled with flashing blue and red lights. That I watched from the top of the stairs as the police went in and out of 3B. No sirens. No radio chatter. Even their footsteps seemed quieter than they should have been, like the building was still enforcing its rules. They talked to Lennox in the hallway. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw the gestures. Saw the tight lines of their mouths point. One of them came up to ask if I'd heard something. "A scream," I said, "right before midnight." Then it just cut off. "Argument?" he asked. "Yeah, it sounded pretty bad." "Did you hear anyone leave? Any doors after that?" I shook my head. "No, just nothing." He wrote it down, thanked me, and went back downstairs. Later, returning from the bodega across the street, I overheard one of the officers talking to Lennox on the front steps. "Neighbor said there was shouting, then screaming," the cop said. "You didn't think to call it in?" "I told you," Lennox replied. "We have a strict noise policy." I went to remind them. When I got there, it was already quiet. "Mr. Lennox," the officer said, patience fraying, "your tenant is missing." Lennox's face was impassive. "And I told you, officer, the rule is clear. No noise after midnight. Noise attracts him. The officer stared at him like he'd just spoken in another language. Attracts who? Lennox's gaze slid past him, up to the dark windows. Go home, he said quietly. You can't help her now. They didn't find anything that night. No broken furniture. No blood. No signs of a struggle. Just an empty apartment in disarray, like someone had been packing or throwing things around, then vanished mid-motion. The man in the cheap suit from 3BS doorframe was gone too. Apparently he'd stormed out earlier that evening, according to another neighbor. No one had seen the woman since. The official word was domestic dispute, potential abduction. They took statements, wrote reports, left. The building swallowed their departure, the last flash of blue light fading from the hallway walls. That night, I sat in my living room, staring at the clock .11:59. The second hand ticked in sharp, visible jerks. I held my breath. At midnight, the sound died. The silence felt different this time, thicker, charged, like the air before lightning strikes. I lasted about 10 minutes before I cracked. I needed to know. The camera system wasn't exactly subtle. Dome cameras in the hall corners, little red LEDs glowing faintly. Lennox had mentioned them during the initial walkthrough. For everyone's safety, he'd said on a stupid impulse. I went down to the second floor, where I'd seen a small windowless room marked maintenance/security. The door wasn't fully closed. The latch was broken. There was a faint glow from inside. The room smelled like hot dust and old electronics. A small desk, a chair, a stack of yellowing papers, and, against the wall, a monitor showing a split-screen feed of the hallway's .1st, second, third, fourth floors. The timestamp in the corner read 00:08. The building was still .in third floor view. I saw the closed door of 3B, the carpet, the overhead light casting a dull circle on the wall. I don't know why I did it, but I rewound the feed. Cards on the table. I work in IT. I know my way around cameras. It wasn't hard to scrub back to 11:50 p.m. The screen flickered. The earlier feed showed the man from 3B leaving, door slamming behind him. The timestamp rolled forward. Shaky motion from the camera as someone walked by on 3's side. Then 11:58 through the grainy lens, I saw 3BS door quiver slightly in its frame. Not open, just flex, like something heavy had leaned against it from the inside. At 11 hours 59 minutes and 30 seconds. The overhead light in the hallway flickered. At midnight, the feed glitched, one frame of static, and the hallway lights dimmed visibly. The building went silent and I felt it, even through the screen. Pressure. The image seemed flatter. Deader. On the monitor, 3BS door began to open. Slowly, so slowly, the gap widening by the width of a blade. Then an inch, then 2. The space beyond it was pitch black. Something long and pale slid out across the threshold. For a second, my brain tried to make it an arm, a leg, something familiar. It wasn't. It was too long, jointed in the wrong places, elbow where a wrist should be, another bend halfway down. The skin, if it was skin, looked like wet paper stretched over wire. It moved with this horrible, careful deliberation, testing the carpet like it was tasting it. Another limb followed, and another. It pulled itself out of 3B in segments like a spider trying to remember how to be human. Tall wasn't even the right word. It unfolded. As it rose, it kept going, joints stacking upon joints until its head, or the part of it that passed for one, brushed the ceiling, making the cheap acoustic tiles bow inward. There was no clear face. Just a smooth, bulbous mass that bulged and contracted slightly with each breath. Where a head might be, the air seemed wrong, blurred, light bent like heat haze over asphalt, except the image was black and white. It paused in the hallway. Every limb splayed lightly, fingertips, there were too many, touching the walls, the floor, the door frames, feeling them, listening. Even on the footage, there was an eerie sensation that any noise I made in that cramped security room might be heard through the screen. The thing cocked its head, if that's what it was, toward the camera. The feed fuzzed for a moment, the image shearing sideways like a corrupted file, then snapping back. Then, very slowly, it started moving, not walking, not crawling. It advanced by lowering itself, spine bending without clear vertebrae, limbs reaching forward, body flowing after them in a horrible, fluid slither that had no business happening in a hallway built for humans. It passed directly beneath the camera as it did. The feed dropped to static for exactly 1 second. When the picture came back, the hallway was empty. The door to 3B was closed. The timestamp read 00:03. My skin felt too tight. My hands were damp on the edge of the desk. I fast-forwarded at 017. Lennox appeared at the end of the hall, walking toward 3B. He moved carefully, like someone approaching an animal that might spook. He stopped at the door, pressed his hand against it, and just stood there. He didn't knock, didn't call out, just held his palm flat against the wood for a full 30 seconds. Then he lowered his hand, looked up at the camera, at me now, watching later, and walked away. I stopped the footage. Back in my apartment, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come. Every tiny shift of the building made me flinch. At some point, past 3, I realized I could hear something, very faint, on the edge of perception. Not in the hallway, inside the walls. A dragging sound. Slow, careful, like something enormous trying not to make noise as it moved between the studs, exploring the paths of pipes and wires, listening for anything that broke the rule. When I woke up the next morning, there was a note taped to my door in neat, careful handwriting. Daniel, there are vacancies now. If you wish to leave, I will release you from your lease. No penalty. If you stay, remember the rule. For your own sake. For everyone's that I haven't left. I don't know if that makes me stupid, broke, or just morbidly fascinated. Maybe all 3. The rent is low. The building is clean. The silence at night is a kind of prison, but it's also protection. Because some nights, just before midnight, I hear footsteps rushing up the stairs from outside. Someone new, late, laughing too loud into their phone. Someone who doesn't know the rule yet. And every time, I open my door and I warn them. Hey, I say, it's almost 12. You should keep it down. Most of them roll their eyes. Some apologize. A few ask, why did I just say? Noise attracts him. If they laugh, I close my door and sit at my table, watching the second hand crawl toward midnight, feeling the building take a breath and hold it. And in the kind of silence that feels like the inside of a mouth, I listen for which apartment he's going to crawl out of next. I used to like old buildings. I liked crooked floors and high ceilings, cracked plaster and windows that stuck when it rained. I told myself they had character, which really just meant they were cheaper, and I wanted to feel like I'd found something special. Not just the only thing I could afford. That's how I ended up at Graybridge Court. 5 stories of dull red brick, wedged between a pharmacy and a pawn shop. The lobby smelled like dust and lemons. There was a fake plant in the corner that had given up pretending to be alive. The elevator didn't work, but the stairwell had a little stained glass window on every landing that caught the light just right around sunset. My name is Mia. I moved in because the rent was low and it was walking distance from the bakery where I work at 5 a.m. Most people don't want to be anywhere at 5 a.m. That schedule labels you either crazy or reliable. I was hoping for the second. The landlord's name was Mr. Carr. He met me in the lobby with a clipboard and a stare that made me feel like I was already late for something. Tall, narrow man, gray hair combed flat, suit that was 1 degree too formal for the building. He moved like someone who'd been in the same routine for decades and didn't see any reason to change. 3rd floor, Unit 3F, he said. No loud parties, no smoking, no subletting. Hallways stay clear. If something breaks, leave a note in the box by the office door. His voice was flat, not rude, just uninterested. Like he'd said these same sentences so many times they'd worn a groove in his mouth that we climbed the stairs together. The 3rd floor hallway was long and narrow, yellowed wallpaper, doors evenly spaced, each with a black metal number nailed slightly crooked above the frame. He stopped outside 3F, unlocked it, and stepped aside. The apartment was small but not awful. Bare wood floor, living room just big enough for a couch and a table, tiny kitchen in the corner, a bedroom that would barely fit my bed. There was a faint smell of old cooking oil and dust, like the ghost of someone's dinners. I know it's not much, I said, half joking, but it's mine. If you pay on time, he said. Rent is due the 1st. Cash, check, or transfer. He handed me the lease. I skimmed it, signed where he tapped. Then he did something I didn't expect. From his jacket pocket, he pulled out a heavy ring of keys. Not just the one for my apartment. A full ring. At least a dozen keys, all different shapes and colors. Old brass ones, newer steel ones. One with a red plastic cap cracked along the edge. He dropped them in my hand. The metal was cold, heavier than it looked. "These are yours," he said. All of them? You might need them," he said. "At night." I tried to laugh. "How many locks does my door have?" "Just the one," he said. "None of these fit 3F. That stopped my smile. "Then what are they for?" I asked. "The building," he said simply. "You'll see. Or you won't. Either way, keep them on you after dark." "You're not going to explain that at all, are you?" He looked at me then, really looked, as if he was weighing how much to tell me. His eyes were pale, almost colorless. "This place was built when things were different," he said finally. "Space was cheaper. Boundaries were softer. Not every room stays put, especially at night." I waited for the punchline that IT didn't come. "If you see a door that isn't there during the day," he said, "do not open it with your hands. Use a key. And if you open something, close it again. We don't need more strays." Strays? But he was already stepping back into the hallway. "Welcome to Greybridge Court, Miss Ruiz," he said. "Don't wander after midnight." He left me standing in my empty apartment with my suitcase, a set of keys, and 1,000 unasked questions. I told myself he was just eccentric, that owners of weird old buildings said weird old things. I put the heavy key ring in my bag and unpacked. For the first week, nothing happened that I got up before dawn, walked to the bakery in the dark, came home covering my clothes in the smell of yeast and coffee. The building was exactly what it looked like. Aging, creaky, harmless. The keys sat on my dresser, metal glinting in the morning light. That I tried them, once on my door. None fit. One almost went in but caught at the wrong angle, like the lock was politely refusing. That I tried them on the storage cupboard across the hall. No luck. The laundry room door on the second floor. The bike room on the ground level. Every time, the keys seemed to slide away from the keyhole at the last second, like two magnets repelling each other. BY day. Greybridge Court was perfectly normal. BY night. It wasn't. The first change was small. 4 or 5 days in. I was walking back from the bathroom at around 11. The overhead lights hummed softly. The wallpaper pattern blurred at the edges from a century of hands brushing against it. My door was in the middle of the hall. Straight ahead, I could see the T-intersection where the corridor turned left and right toward the stairwells. And halfway between my door and the intersection on the right-hand wall was a door. It was dark brown, heavy, with a brass knob and an old-fashioned keyhole. The number on it was 2½ I stopped. There was no 2½ I'd walk this hallway every day. I knew the doors, 3A, 3B, 3C, then the fire hose cabinet, then 3D, 3E, my 3F, then 3G and 3H at the far end. No 3½. No halves at all. I turned around. Behind me, the doors were the same as always. I looked back. 2½ Plain as anything, as if it had always been there, and I just somehow failed to notice a whole door. The air near it felt cooler, not cold, just a few degrees lower than the rest of the hallway, like a draft was seeping through the edges, except there was no visible gap. I remembered what Carr had said. If you see a door that isn't there during the day. My hand went to my pocket before I could tell it not to. The keys were warm from being against my leg. I thumbed through them, metal edges clicking softly, until my fingers brushed against one that felt different, longer, with a bow shaped like a little half circle. When I pulled it out, I saw tiny numbers stamped into the metal near the teeth. 2½ I stood there, heart thudding, staring at the key and then at the door. The hall seemed to lean slightly, everything narrowing until it was just me, the lock, and the space between. I could have gone back to my apartment. I could have pretended I hadn't seen it. Instead, I stepped forward and slid the key into the lock. It went in smoothly, like it had been waiting. The metal turned with a soft, satisfying click that I felt more than heard. When I opened the door, the first thing that hit me was the cold. It surged out in a single breath, colder than any winter draft. It stabbed the inside of my nose, made my eyes water. My skin pebbled instantly, goosebumps racing up my arms. On the other side of the threshold was a corridor long, narrow, coated in frost. Not a dusting. Thick. The walls were white with it, delicate crystals growing in fractal patterns. The floor looked like someone had poured water and let it freeze in uneven waves. My breath fogged instantly, spilling into the space like smoke that I took one step in. The ice crackled faintly under my shoe, like distant glass breaking. The air felt sharp, each inhale painful. At the far end of the corridor, maybe 20 feet away, there was a door with no handle. Just a blank slab of black wood. Whispers skated along the frost. They weren't loud. More like the suggestion of speech, tiny currents of air shifting. My name slid past my ear in a voice that sounded almost like mine, twisted through the cold that I went back. Quickly, teeth chattering now. I stepped out, pulled the door closed, and locked it with shaking fingers. The key warmed against my palm as if it were reclaiming something from me. When I looked back up, the door was gone. Just wallpaper and the faint outline where the pattern didn't quite match. That I slept badly that night. That IT didn't stop there. The next one appeared 3 days later on the opposite wall near the stairwell. It had no number, just a brass plate with an engraving that looked like an eye. The matching key was small and black, teeth jagged. That I opened it at 10:45, heart pounding, half hoping it would just reveal a broom closet and make me feel stupid. Instead, it opened into a room with no furniture, no windows. Every wall was covered in portraits. Hundreds of faces staring down from gilded frames, painted in thick oil. Men, women, children. Styles from different eras, some cracked, some bright. The air smelled like turpentine and something sweet, almost rotten. They whispered, too. Not like the ice corridor. This was layered, a constant susurrus of voices, all pitched low, overlapping. When I stepped in, every painted eye rolled in my direction. Some moved slow, some snapped like someone waking up. I recognized one of the faces. It was the woman from the laundry room, the one who hummed to herself when she folded towels. Her portrait was in the second row near the door. She was painted in colors that looked too real. The blue of her sweater, the chipped red on her nails. In the portrait, she wasn't humming. Her mouth was open wide, stretched in a soundless scream. Her eyes were fixed on mine, pleading. My stomach dropped. Behind me, something cleared its throat. I didn't turn around. I stepped back out, closed the door, and slid the key off the ring. I walked straight to the trash chute, opened it, and dropped the key in. It didn't make a sound when it fell. After that, I stopped opening doors. But the building didn't stop making them. They started appearing earlier, before 10. A narrow iron door tucked into the corner by the stairwell. A panel where a painting had been, now hinged with a tiny knob. One half hidden behind a radiator that had never moved in the time I'd lived there. The keys grew familiar under my fingers, each one with a weight and temperature that seemed to change depending on what it belonged to. I kept the ring with me everywhere. Why then? Greybridge Court didn't feel like a building anymore. Felt like a body changing in its sleep. The last key was the smallest. I didn't notice it until the night everything came together. Halloween, of course. Wind howling outside, leaves scraping down the street like dry hands. I'd worked a long shift. We'd done pumpkin bread and spiderweb cupcakes, and I'd smiled at 100 kids in costumes until my face hurt. I came home around 9, muscles aching, brain foggy. I wanted a shower, a movie, and sleep. In the hallway outside 3F, there was a new door, right where my own door should have been. Mine was still there. 3F peeling black numbers, brass knob. But next to it, sharing the same frame somehow, was another. This one was painted a flat, featureless gray. No knob, just a keyhole and, above it, a small metal plate with a single number stamped into it. .0. A chill went through me that had nothing to do with the October AI art in my pocket. The keys shifted. I dug them out with numb fingers, letting the ring dangle. One key had slipped around to face the front. I could swear I hadn't seen it before. Tiny, almost delicate, with a hollow bow shaped like a circle. No teeth at all along the shaft, just smooth metal. Etched into the bow was the same number. .0. I held it, the weight absurd for something so small. I could have walked away. I could have stepped into my real apartment, locked the door, shoved the keys into a drawer, and waited until morning. Instead, I slid the key into the gray door's lock. There was no resistance, no click, just a soft sensation, like pushing through water. The door opened on darkness. Not the dark of an unlit room, a thicker dark, the kind that swallows shapes, the kind that makes the edges of things uncertain. I stepped through. The smell hit me first. My smell. Laundry detergent and bakery sugar, and that specific blend of cheap shampoo and skin that you only notice when you lean close to yourself in a mirror after a long day. As my eyes adjusted, I realized why I was standing in my bedroom. Same narrow space, same cheap IKEA bed, the same print of a city skyline on the wall, hung slightly crooked because the nail was in the wrong place and I kept forgetting to fix it. My hoodie on the chair, my backpack on the floor. Everything was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. There was someone in my bed. The blanket was pulled up to their shoulders, dark hair spilling over the pillow. One arm lay outside the covers, small hand resting on the mattress, fingers curled inward. They were breathing. I heard it. Soft, rhythmic, inhale, exhale, a faint whistle on each exhale, like the beginning of a snore. The sound existed in this room even as the hallway behind me hummed with that strange, hungry quiet. I stepped closer. My heart was doing something strange. It wasn't pounding. It was thinning, stretching, like the beat had to travel farther to get where it needed to go. The figure in the bed shifted slightly, as if sensing me. Their face turned toward me on the pillow. It was my face. Not a distorted version. Not some ghostly variation. It was me, down to the faint scar by my left eyebrow from when I fell off my bike at 12. Hair mussed in the same messy bun. A smudge of flour still on my cheek from work. I was asleep. Watching myself sleep is not something anyone should ever have to do. There was something indecent about it, something that made my skin crawl. I saw the little twitch my eyelid did when I dreamed, the way my fingers jerked occasionally. I looked down at my own hands. They were pale, paler than they should have been. The edges of them seemed blurred. If I focused too hard, I could see the faint outline of the bed frame through my fingers. On the wall, the print of the city skyline wavered, as if reflected in water behind me. The gray door was still open. Through it, I could see the hallway of 3F, the wallpaper pattern, the dim light. But it felt farther away than it should have. Like a painting at the end of a long tunnel. My sleeping self murmured something. I leaned closer, unable to stop myself. Her lips parted slightly. My lips. The words were barely audible, but they were my voice. "Don't open it again." Her hand twitched toward the edge of the bed, fingers closing on empty air. The ring of keys in my pocket felt suddenly, crushingly heavy. Behind me, in the hallway, I heard a soft footstep. Not the landlord, not a neighbor. Something heavier, slower, the kind of tread you feel in your teeth. A shadow moved across the light pooling under the door. Tall, wrongly jointed, familiar in a way that made my stomach plummet. The building's other doors, the ice, the portraits, the things that lived just beyond the corners. They'd seen me open this. I realized then that maybe this was what Carr meant by, "We don't need more strays." The gray door didn't just open into my bedroom. It opened into a version of it where I wasn't inside my body anymore. I took a step backward, away from my sleeping self, toward the doorway. My feet didn't quite touch the floor. The air felt thicker, like I was moving through syrup. On the bed, the other me's breathing changed. Sped up, then slowed, then hitched. Her fingers clawed at the sheets as if trying to grab something. Her eyes flew open. They were mine, but they didn't see me. They were looking past me. The gray door. Whatever was starting to press against the other side. The air in the hallway thickened. The light dimmed. The shape in the gap between door and floor hunched, studying the threshold, testing it. The sleeping me, no, the real me, whispered one last thing. "Close it." Her eyes rolled back. My limbs finally listened. I stumbled backward, reaching for the gray door, fingers slipping on the smooth paint. The key was still in the lock. I grabbed it, twisted hard. For a second, there was resistance, something thick pressing back from the other side. Then it gave. The door slammed shut with a sound that felt like it tore the air. I stumbled into the hallway of 3F, back against the opposite wall, gasping. The wallpaper was solid beneath my palms. The overhead light buzzed. Somewhere down the hall, a toilet flushed. Normal sounds. Blessed, stupid normal. The gray door was gone. Just my apartment door, 3F, slightly scuffed near the bottom where my suitcase had hit it the first day. My hands were solid again. My heartbeat settled, heavy and present in my chest, and my keys lay on the floor where I dropped them. The ring was lighter now. The 0 key was gone. Inside my apartment, my bed was emptied and no indent on the pillow. No warmth lingering on the sheets. Just the faint imprint of my body in the mattress from other nights that I stood there in the doorway for a long time, listening far away, somewhere deep in the building. Maybe below, maybe above, maybe sideways. I heard a door open slowly, and somewhere that sounded like my own bedroom, a voice that could have been mine whispered to someone, "Don't let her back in." I sleep with the lights on now. I don't open doors that weren't there in the daylight. I keep the keys with me, what's left of them, and sometimes I swear they move on their own, rearranging themselves into new combinations. Every once in a while, waking up in the half-dark, I get the sickening feeling that the room is almost right. Almost mine. But not quite, like I traded places with someone once, and the building can't quite decide which version it wants to keep. If you ever get handed keys for rooms that don't exist, don't use them. Because some doors don't lead somewhere else. They lead to some other you, and she might not be happy you're visiting. I moved into that building because it was cheap and because I told myself I didn't care about the noise. I was wrong about both. My name is Sam. I'd just gone through a breakup brutal enough that dividing furniture felt like dividing organs. I kept my bed, my TV, a battered couch, and the sense that I needed to get out of our old neighborhood before I started looping the same streets like a ghost. The place I found was a 3-story brick shoebox on the edge of downtown. Faded for rent sign in the front window, tangled bushes out front, the vague smell of old cigarettes seeping out every time the door opened. The Craigslist ad said, 1BR, 2nd floor, responsible tenants only, landlord on site. That last part made me feel weirdly safe. On-site meant problems got solved quickly, right? Leaky pipes, loud neighbors, whatever. There'd be someone upstairs dealing with it. The guy who showed me the apartment called himself Mr. Cole. He met me in the entryway, keys jangling on his belt. Late 50s maybe, compact build, hair buzzed short, eyes a pale washed-out blue that never really landed on my face. He moved with the slow, stiff care of someone whose knees hurt all the time. 2nd floor, Unit 2B, he said. 1st floor's the Martinez family. I stay up on 3. Keeps things simple. His voice had that flat Midwestern tone that made everything sound like a statement. Never a question. The apartment was fine. Yellowed walls, old radiator under the window, kitchen linoleum curling at the edges. Bedroom big enough for my bed and little else. The ceiling above the living room had a long crack running across it, stained slightly brown around the edges. Water damage? I asked, nodding at the crack. Old, he said. From before I bought the place. Roof's fixed now. I signed the lease that day. 1st month and deposit in cash. He handed me 1 key for the front door, 1 for my unit, and said, office emails on the lease. Hours 9 to 5 if you need anything. What about upstairs? I asked. You said you live on the 3rd floor? He grunted. I do, he said. Don't worry about it. I keep to myself. He said it like a promise and a warning at the same time. The first couple of weeks, it felt almost normal. The Martinez kids thumped around downstairs. Someone in the next building practiced trumpet badly every evening. Pipes groaned whenever anyone showered. My radiator hissed and clanged, trying its best to remember how to be a heating system that I never heard anything from above. If you've ever lived in an old building, you know how weird that is. Floors are drums. Every step becomes a performance. But 3B, my landlord lives upstairs, was dead quiet. The mailbox labeled Cole always had a flyer or 2 sticking out of it. I'd hear the main door open and close at random times, but I never actually saw him again. I emailed once when my sink started leaking. No response. The next day, I found a cardboard bucket under the drip that hadn't been there before. The leak was fixed. No note. Okay, I thought, he's around. just not chatty. The first time I heard the footsteps, it was about 2 in the morning. I was half asleep on the couch, TV unwatched, blue light flickering against the walls. The building had settled into that late-night hush where everyone's either sleeping or doing their best impression of it. The radiator had clicked off. Outside, a distant siren and the occasional car on the main road. Then, directly above me, something slammed against the floor. Not a dropped object. Footfall, heavy enough that dust sifted from the crack in the ceiling. Glittering briefly in the TV light, I sat up, heart punching hard once, twice. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls closer. Another footstep, slow, deliberate, a rhythmic thump that matched the pace of someone pacing a room. Thinking, if 2B was laid out like mine, the living room was beneath their living room. The steps tracked that way, back and forth, a few paces, turn, back again. I stared at the ceiling. Sounded like boots. Not shoes, not bare feet. Boots. Heavy soles slapping down with each step. I tried to tell myself it was comforting. The landlord lives upstairs, right? Maybe he works nights. Maybe he's an insomniac. People pace when they can't sleep. After 10 minutes, the pacing stopped. What followed was worse. Something metal scraped across the floor above me. A long, dragging sound, like a bed frame or a heavy table being shifted inch by inch. It started near the center of the room and moved toward the corner, right over where my head was if I leaned back on the couch. The scrape wasn't smooth. It hit little bumps, caught, jerked forward again. The sound vibrated down through the ceiling into my teeth. I stood up without quite deciding to. The apartment felt colder, the air heavier. Goosebumps prickled along my arms. "Mr. Cole," I called, feeling stupid talking to my ceiling. "Everything okay up there?" The scraping stopped. Silence. It was the specific silence of someone freezing mid-movement to listen. My throat suddenly felt very dry. When I didn't say anything else, the footsteps resumed. Not pacing now. Crossing the room in a straight line, heading away toward what would have been the hallway. Then nothing. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I checked my email. I'd sent a message to the landlord the day before about the heat being inconsistent. Nothing. No reply. The leak he'd handled silently. This nothing. On my way out, I glanced up the stairwell. The third-floor landing door was closed. No nameplate, no apartment numbers visible. Just dull paint and a no tenant access sign tacked slightly crooked in the center. I almost went up, just to knock, to ask if that had been him. Instead, I went to work and stacked it on the pile of weird things you ignore in cities. The noises didn't stop. Some nights, nothing. Some nights, the boots started around 11 and went until 3. The pattern wasn't random. Whoever, whatever, was up there had a route. For steps, turn, for steps back. Sometimes it took longer, sometimes shorter, but that basic rhythm never changed. Then the dragging started accompanying it. Always metal. Always that grinding scrape that set my teeth on edge. Sometimes it seemed closer to my bedroom. Sometimes the sound of it crawled across the ceiling, slow and steady, making my imagination fill the blank with bed, trunk, something with wheels, something resisting. I left my TV on most nights. Not because it helped. The footsteps leaked through the sound, a separate layer. But having something human in the room with me, even just canned laughter from a show I wasn't watching, made the difference between lying there in sweating silence and not completely losing it. I emailed again. "Hi, Mr. Cole. Just checking if everything is okay upstairs. There's a lot of noise at night, heavy footsteps, furniture moving. If that's you, no worries. Just wanted to make sure everything's safe with the floors/structure. Thanks." No response. I called the number on the lease. It went straight to voicemail. Generic robot voice. The mailbox was full. I asked Mrs. Martinez downstairs, casually, if she'd ever met the landlord's family. Anyone else on the 3rd floor. She frowned. "He lives upstairs?" she said. "That's what he told me." She shook her head. "I've been here 4 years. I've never seen anyone go up there. Just him when he first showed us the apartment. That floor's empty, Mijo. He lives across town. Has a house with a yard." I laughed it off, but my stomach did a slow, cold flip. That night, around 1, The boots started again. Heavier. Closer. It sounded like they were walking in circles now, right above whatever spot I was in. When I went to the bedroom, they followed. When I came back to the living room, they returned. It felt petty. It felt intentional. The dragging sound that night wasn't a single object. It was several. Scrapes and clanks overlapped, different pitches, a metal chorus grating along directly overhead. Sometimes it stopped abruptly, like someone had dropped whatever they were hauling. Sometimes it resumed with more force. By2, my nerves were shot. Maybe that's why I did what I did. I grabbed my phone, turned on the flashlight, and walked out into the hallway. The building felt even older at night. Paint yellowed under the dim bulbs, shadows pooling in the corners. The air had that thick, dusty stillness of a place that had absorbed too many years of other people's lives. The third-floor door loomed at the top of the stairs. Up close, the No Tenant Access sign was stained. Letters faded. The doorknob was scuffed dull by hands long gone. From the other side, the footsteps were clearer. Thud, 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 turn, thud, thud, thud. My heart beat a jittery counterpoint. I tried the knob. It was stiff, but not locked. The door opened with a soft, reluctant creak, like it hadn't been moved in a long time. A wave of stale, cold air rolled out, carrying the smell of dust and something faintly sour. "Hello," I called, my voice sounding small. "Mr. Cole?" My flashlight beam cut into the darkness. The third-floor hallway was empty. Not just of people. Of everything. No carpet. Just raw, splintered floorboards. No wallpaper, just bare plaster, cracked and peeling, exposing lath beneath in places. Wires hung from the ceiling where light fixtures should have been. Doors were missing, leaving only dark, rectangular mouths opening into gutted rooms. Dust coated everything. Thick, undisturbed, softening edges. It glittered in the beam of my flashlight when I moved. The sound stopped as soon as I'd opened the door. The boots, the scraping gone. Silence pressed against my ears, too heavy to be natural. I forced myself to step onto the third-floor landing. The boards complained quietly under my weight. Little puffs of dust rose around my shoes. It looked like a construction site that someone had walked away from 20 years ago. Exposed pipes, a sheet of plastic tacked over a large hole in the wall, a stack of drywall leaning crooked against a stud. The apartment directly above mine, 3B, should have been halfway down the hall on the left. If the layout matched, I walked that way, the flashlight jittering in my hand. "Mr. Cole?" I tried again. "If you're up here, the noise is freaking people out. We should talk about it." My voice died quickly in the emptiness, swallowed by old wood and plaster. The doorway where 3B should have been was just that. A doorway. No door, no number. Just an opening into a room stripped down to its skeleton. Studs, crossbeams, bits of insulation hanging like cobwebs. The window in the far wall was bare, glass clouded with grime. I stepped inside. The floor was dust, inches of it. My footprints showed up immediately. Clear outlines of my boots, the tread pattern crisp. The ceiling above me was the same cracked plaster I'd seen from below, stained in familiar spots, now from the other side. It was like seeing the underside of my own life. No furniture. No bed. No rugs, just emptiness and dust and the faint, ever-present smell of old buildings, which meant the footsteps, the dragging. None of it had a physical cause I could see. I turned slowly, my light sweeping the room. That's when I saw the other footprints. They were everywhere, not as crisp as mine. Smeared at the edges, some overlapping, some starting in the middle of nowhere and ending abruptly. Larger than my feet, heavier. The tread pattern was different. A deep-lugged boot that bit into the dust. They tracked a path along the perimeter of the room, back and forth, over and over, around and around. Near the window, which, from up here, had no curtains to draw, into the corner above where my couch was, to the spot above my bed. In one place, near the center, the footprints were deeper, as if whoever made them had stood there for a long time. Watching. I followed the trail with my light. It circled the room. It approached the doorway. And then they stopped, right behind where I was standing. The dust in front of my feet was untouched. Behind me, the last two prints were pressed deep into the floorboards, toes pointed directly at my back that I didn't turn around. Every molecule of my body screamed to look. Every horror movie I'd ever seen screamed not to. The air behind my neck cooled abruptly, like someone had opened a window that wasn't there. My skin crawled. Tiny hairs lifted, a wave that rolled from my shoulders to the base of my skull. Then something exhaled on the back of my neck that it was warm. Not a breeze, not a draft. Breath, damp, human breath washing across my skin. It smelled faintly of metal and dust and something else I couldn't place. Like the inside of a long-shut room that someone had only recently begun to pace again. My whole body locked up. My legs refused to move. My hand clenched so hard around the flashlight that my fingers went numb. The weight of a gaze settled on the back of my head. There's no other way to describe it. You know when someone's staring at you from across a room, that prickling awareness between your shoulder blades? It was like that, multiplied by 10, drilling into my skull. Slowly, very slowly, the exhale turned into a whisper that I know words. Just the shape of them almost formed. The sound threaded around my ears without quite making it inside. For half a second, I thought I heard my name. Then the breath reversed. A long, deliberate inhale, right against my skin, like someone smelling me. The footprints behind me shifted. I heard it. A faint, gritty scuff in the dust, like weight shifting from heel to toe. That broke whatever paralysis had me. I bolted. I didn't turn to look. I didn't stop to see if anything followed. I ran out of 3B, down the hall, down the stairs, barely catching myself on the railing as I nearly missed a step. The door to the third floor slammed behind me with a hollow boom that shook dust loose from the ceiling on my floor. Back in my apartment, I locked the door, slid the chain, shoved a chair under the knob like that would help against something that could bleed through ceilings. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I went to the management office. Address on my lease at IT was a strip mall unit on the edge of town, sandwiched between a nail salon and a check cashing place. The window had faded blinds. The door had peeling letters. Cole Property Management. Inside, it smelled like stale coffee and toner. A young woman sat at a desk, scrolling through something on her computer. She looked up when I came in. "Can I help you?" "Yeah," I said, throat dry. "I'm in one of Mr. Cole's buildings." "Maple and Ninth?" He said he lived upstairs. "I went up there last night. It's gutted. No one lives on the third floor." She frowned. "Maple and 9th." She clicked around on her screen. "Oh, building 14. Yeah, no one's been up there in years. Top floor's condemned. We're supposed to be renovating when there's budget." "I met him," I insisted. "He told me he lived up there." Her expression shifted. "You met Mr. Cole? Like, in person?" "Yeah, older guy, buzz cut, blue eyes. Lives upstairs." She shook her head slowly. "Mr. Cole died 3 years ago," she said. "Heart attack. His son runs the company now. We've been trying to sell a lot of the properties he held on to." The room tilted slightly. "Then who showed me the apartment?" She gave me a tight, polite smile that said she thought I was confused or lying and wanted me to leave. "Maybe it was the superintendent," she offered. "We don't have anyone living on site at that building right now. There is no superintendent at my building. There's just a name on a mailbox. Cole, black letters on a metal slot. No first name. I went back to my apartment because I didn't know what else to do. I considered moving out, breaking the lease, just walking away. But rent prices are what they are, and every time I look at listings, my stomach knots. I tell myself I'll save, that I'll get out soon. At night, the footsteps continue. Sometimes they pace. Sometimes they stand in one spot for so long I feel a migraine blooming right below that patch of ceiling. Sometimes, when I'm almost asleep, I hear the faintest drag of metal, like something being pulled into place. Once, at 3:17 a.m., my phone lit up with a new email from Landlord. No subject line, no body text, just the old signature. M. Cole, upstairs. There are still footprints in the dust of 3B. I know because every now and then, I force myself up there just to see. My own boot marks stay where they are, thin outlines leading to the center of the room. The deeper ones shift. They're closer to the doorway now. closer to where my bed would be, below if you punch through the floor. The last time I went up, there was a new set. They started in the middle of the room, walked to the edge where the ceiling meets the wall, and stopped. Toes pointed directly down that night, lying in my bed. I stared up at the stained crack in my ceiling and listened to the heavy boots walk back and forth at some point. As I hovered between awake and asleep, something exhaled above me. The air on my face stirred. Just a breath, barely there, like someone lying on the other side of the ceiling, mouth pressed to the plaster. Checking if I was still here, did I tell myself I'll move soon, before he decides to come all the way down.